I'm Jennie Rayment, and today I'm going to show you a marvellous trick that you can do with the Vlieseline Quickscreen Square, because we're going to make a folded log cabin cushion. Now you're going to need some Quickscreen Square. Great product. Comes on a roll like this. You might want to buy 1 metre, 2 metres, 3 metres. Wait and see until you've seen how easy the project is that we're going to make. Now I've cut off the Vlieseline Quickscreen Square roll, a 30 centimetre section, and from that I've cut a 30 centimetre square. Now if you're fussed about it, basically it's 6 whole squares. In addition to that, to make this cushion front, I'm going to need a 2.5 inch square for the centre, and I'm going to need 2 inch strips for the other 2 colours. So I've cut my 2.5 inch square for the centre, and I've cut some 2.5 inch strips. These strips need to be cut right across the fabric, right across from left to right across the fabric, all right? Not down it, please. Having cut that, I'm going to take my little square and I'm going to put it in the middle of my Quickscreen Square. But because the lines might possibly show through at times, it will pay you to turn it over. So I've turned the Vlieseline Quickscreen Square over, put a tiny dot in the middle, and to find the very centre of my square, if I fold that in half and in half again, that will give me the centre of that. And it's easy to place it in the very middle. There we are, lined up. Just double check, that's it. Right, from one of your colours, I'm using pink to begin with, as you can see on this cushion here. Cut the same length of strip. So I've cut a 2.5 inch length strip. I'm going to place this right side down on the right hand side of my square, and it will be aligned with the lines on the Quickscreen Square. When you've done that, it will probably pay you to just put a pin in it, because we're going to start stitching in just a moment. Now I do suggest you thread up with thread that matches your fabric, so you can see what I'm stitching. I'm using black thread. Now I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and on this particular machine, the magic ability of the machine is I can shift the needle to a 1/4 inch exactly away from this edge of the presser foot, and I do that by pressing the stitch width button. And if I take the stitch width to 5.2 or 5.4, it doesn't really matter because they're both just about a 1/4 inch, that will put my needle at a 1/4 inch away from this edge of the presser foot. Starting just outside the fabric, I like to lower the needle down to start off with, because that means it starts the stitch. Find the presser foot and you will proceed in orderly fashion. As you approach the pin, remove the pin. Right, get to the bottom, raise the presser foot, take the needle out and give it a 1/4 turn going anti-clockwise. Right, fold the piece of fabric back. Now I'm going to fold the pink fabric back, and I'm hoping you can count to 2. Because if we stare at the Quickscreen Square, we can see 1 line, 2 lines. You are going to fold the raw edge of the fabric back to the line number 2. Okay, I'm anticipating you can count to 2. It might pay you to put a pin in it just to hold it in place. So put a pin in. Make sure the pin head's kept well out of the way of the stitching. You're now going to take that same colour and lay the fabric on top, aligning with the squares and the lines on the grid, and the edge of the fabric underneath. Place it underneath your presser foot, lower your presser foot, drop the needle down, there's no need to cut the threads, and sew a fraction. Don't sew too far, because what we're going to do is to cut this pink strip off exactly level with the white square underneath, right down to the bottom. When you get to the bottom, stop, raise the presser foot, take the needle out, give it a turn 1/4, count to 2 again, 1, 2, fold the fabric back so the edge of the fabric is exactly on the line there. Stick another pin in it. Right, and now we can do the exciting thing. We're going to change colour. So I'm going to use the blue colour. Just move that pin a bit further out of the way. Start off with the blue, lined up with the edge of the fabric. There. Aligned with the lines that you can see on the grid. Underneath the presser foot, lower the presser foot. Basically, when you do log cabin, you're doing L for log cabin. Sew down a little bit, trim off exactly flush with the edge of the fabric, and proceed down, orderly fashion. Here we go, down to the bottom, stop, raise the presser foot. Guess what I'm going to do? Turn it 1/4 inch, lift the presser foot, and the presser foot falls off, but not a problem. Just screw it back on again. It's probably because it's been travelling in the back of the car. Let's just stick that back on. There we go. That's right. There, that's it again. Back to normal. Make sure it's actually back to normal. And lift it. Fold the fabric back. Count 2 again. There we are. We've started our second L, part of the L for log cabin. Pop a pin in it. And guess what colour is going to be next? Yeah, the blue again. Right, so line it all up. And it's such a simple technique because you could use any scraps of fabric you happen to like. Sew down a bit. Now, let me just show you what happens if you don't remember to cut it off. So if you proceed all the way down, remember we're keeping it in lined up with the lines on the grid, and get to the bottom, first of all, you're running the risk of sewing over a pin. And secondly, you've got to raise the presser foot, pull the work right out, get your scissors, cut it off. It's much easier to trim before you actually start sewing. Fold it back the 2 inches, pop a pin in place, and we just keep on going like this. So the next fabric will be pink down here, another pink, blue, blue. Right, so I've continued adding my L for log cabins, and you keep going until it's a size you happen to fancy. Once you get to the finished size, what I suggest you do is just run around the edge with a long stitch on your sewing machine. So, edge of the presser foot on the edge of the fabric. Now, another top tip, if you can shift your needle to 1/4 of an inch, why not move it right over to the edge of the presser foot? And then you know you're going to be inside the seam allowance. Make your stitch length as long as possible. There we are. And right the way round. That'll hold all the edges in place. And just be careful as you jump over the strips because you've got a little fold. Because strangely enough, the design is called folded log cabin. Right, all the way along here. Because once you've held it down, it's ready for a border. And it's also ready for a spot of manipulation because we can do a little bit of twiddling. Right, so along here. Just make sure you don't catch the fold as you sew past. To the end, stop, raise the presser foot, remove the pin, and there we are. Now, you could leave it exactly like this, if that's your preference, because you've got the light and shadow under the folds in the log cabin. But because you've got a folded edge, it can be lifted up and folded back and possibly caught down either by hand or on the machine with a very short stitch, or even a fancy pattern, or whatever your heart desireth. So all of these folds will roll back. You'll just get a little roll back in the middle there, but as you go out, the roll back gets longer and longer. Now, this can be secured in place with 1 stitch. You might want to put 2 stitches in there. And if we look at the sample I have here, the one here, I've just secured it in place with a little tiny weeny stitch in the middle. Now, because I'm not a hand sewer, I'm sorry, I like to do this on the machine. So I've just set my stitch lengths being really small and done literally just a backwards and forwards there, jumped backwards and forwards, etc., in the middle. But if you prefer, you could leave it totally and utterly unmanipulated and just have the extra shadow given out by the folds in the fabric. So that's that. You could use 2 fabrics, different one in the middle, because in log cabin design, very often the middle will be red because that represents the heart of the fire. The back L would be dark because that's a dark at the back of the hearth. The front would be lighter because that's a light given out by the fire. But log cabin's really easy to do and use up all those scraps. So here we have the same sort of thing done using a whole load of different scraps. Great idea for using up your scraps. So see how easy it is. So very easy. Sorry about the pun. All you need is a bit of Quickscreen Square. Now you're going to go out and buy meters and meters and meters of it. You can make up a panel for your quilt block. You could, as I showed you, use up all the scraps. You could just have a really rather interesting folded log cabin cushion that's your own unique project.